Thank you very much. Clayton, you have outdone yourself today. You got 4 former governors, 2 current members of the Congress, host of future statewide leaders, former lieutenant governors, attorney generals, and the person who filled the House is John Warner. If there was ever a question about that, it was Senator Warner was kind enough to come by, the little party after the swearing-in ceremony. I'm up there in the Russell conference room, the biggest room there. We must have had 400 or 500 people, and I've been a senator all of about an hour and a half. And John Warner got twice the ovation that I did. And he took great pride in introducing me as the new junior senator. John Warner is a remarkable person. It is right, we started, even though I voted for him back in 1992, we started first getting to know each other when I actually had the audacity to run against him. I think Doug made mention of the fact that great campaign in 1996 where we did have the bumper strip, Mark, not John. More often than not, in the South Side, people came up and said, "Is that a biblical reference?" And the people of Virginia in that race in 1996 had the good sense to rehire the right Warner. And he was elected 5 times, and I have to tell you, if he had chosen to run again, it would have been 6. And the reason why it is so special for me to have not by any means replaced, but taken that seat, is because if you look not just at those actions of what he did specifically for Virginia, but if you look at any of the great battles over the last 20 years in this country, when the challenge was going to be whether our nation was going to jerk too much to the left or too much to the right, whether it was the effort about judicial appointments, whether it was the effort on energy, whether it was the effort on making sure that we had a bipartisan response to the tragedies around 9/11. John Warner was in every one of those efforts. I don't know what it is about the Senate that when groups of people from both parties try to work together in the Senate, they are called immediately a gang. But John Warner was a gang member long before it was cool. And we owe him an enormous debt of gratitude. And Clayton, good choice to bring us both out here. It's a really impressive audience today, and I love that theme of bipartisanship. I think bipartisanship can be no better reflected than one of our earlier pairs, John Chichester and Tom Davis, together. Now, which parties were they from again? But this is it's a remarkable crowd, and so many friends that I've had the honor to work with over the years. I do mention one challenge. I was saying to folks at the table that with this distinguished group, the only thing that is a little bit challenging to me, and one of the things we have to decide to commit to as Virginians, if we're going to keep Virginia special, is that this room would have been very cool circa 1999. We look around a little bit, and some of us are getting up there. I remember when I was the new guy in Virginia politics. And one of the things that we have to commit ourselves to is we've got to make sure that we continue to keep what is special about Virginia, people knowing each other around the state. One of the first organizations I got involved in Virginia was the Virginia Foundation for Independent Colleges. And what struck me about that was that people in Winchester knew people in Richmond, and people in Norfolk knew people in Roanoke. And there was a connection. All of us in Northern Virginia were always kind of a little bit odd even then. but there was a connectivity that made us special as Virginians. And as the changing nature of our economy and our businesses become more global and our views go beyond the boundaries of the Commonwealth, I think we really all need, those of us who've been in leadership roles, still are in leadership roles, that we do more to try to reconnect that Virginia specialness. I see my great friend Lee Middleditch over here, who had this great vision about 12 or 14 years ago of creating the Sorensen Institute, to try to make sure that we could create that kind of collaboration of people who wanted to serve in public office could get to know each other, Democrats and Republicans alike, and they go through this course. And it has spurred a whole host of folks who now serve in the General Assembly and elsewhere. Matter of fact, my good friend Tom Davis and I, are in a series of us and a number of the college presidents, we're actually hosting this coming Saturday a meeting of the graduates of all the various leadership organizations. We've got great organizations like Sorensen, like Lead Virginia, like Metro Richmond. Every community in Virginia has got a leadership organization, but what we don't do enough of is connecting them together, and we're hopefully going to have over at University of Richmond, Ed Ayers has been a great partner in this, about 400 to 500 people. Over 500, Ann, very good. I'm going to hold you to that. Over 500 people coming together so we can try to rebuild this connectedness, and the Chamber and Virginia Free and others are going to be part of that. So one of my first messages, I hope, and we will get to some of the challenges we face, is, one of the things we need to make clear is that we don't lose the uniqueness of being Virginians. I have, as John pointed out in that campaign, you can be a Virginian by birth or adoption. I happen to be by adoption, but I was not originally born here, but I can't think of anywhere else I'd rather live, anywhere else I'd raise my family. And that unique Virginia heritage, history, and quite honestly, willingness to find common ground is something that is remarkable. And I hope and pray that as we look around and we see other races come along, that we don't lose that. I mean, and again, John Warner has done so much to reflect that. My good friend John Chichester here, and we had a little challenge back when I was governor in 2004 about Virginia's budget. And many of you in this room had to endure countless PowerPoints from me on, Virginia's budget challenges. And 47 town halls, or 63 town halls later, John Warner came down to Richmond one day, stood up on the third floor of the Capitol, and as only John Warner could do, stood up and said, "Politics be damned, let's do what's right for Virginia." And in that one statement did more than my 63 PowerPoint presentations could do altogether. And again, Virginia Free has reflected that way. Here is where we come together, not as Democrats, Republicans, or independents, but we come together as people who care about Virginia, recognize that it's the private sector that drives our jobs, that drives our economy, that we've got to make sure that if Virginia is going to continue to prosper, we have the transportation network, we have the education system, we have the recognition that we cannot prosper in Virginia if all the good jobs are just in Northern Virginia or Hampton Roads, but South Side and Southwest Virginia and the Valley all have to be part of this enormously special Commonwealth. Now, sometimes my task, I guess, was to talk about the current Senate. I'd rather talk about Virginia. The current Senate's got some challenges. The current Congress has got some challenges. Tom Davis and John Chichester have laid out some of those challenges. And I'm not going to go through too much of my normal litany today. But we are at an incredibly transformational time. There was a story the other day that said that the election in 2012, while not by any means attracting the same kind of media attention that the election of 2008, that in many ways the election of 2012 may even be more transformational than the election of 2008. We've gone through this period over the last decade plus of the transformation of our whole world by technology, by the flow of information, by the flow of capital. Things like national boundaries no longer seem to matter as much. Talent, capital, flow regardless of time zone or national boundary. And our world at this point, after a period of some fairly substantial growth, is being challenged on every front. We all see the slow train wreck that plays out on the front page of the newspapers with Europe's failure to grapple with their challenge. But it's not just Europe. I'm the chair of the U.S.-India caucus, and I was in India in January, and that nation that had been racing ahead at 8 and 9% growth rates has now got a political paralysis that almost matches ours, and their growth rate's down to now 5.5%, and enormous uncertainty in their nation. China, which was leaping ahead, has now got growth rates that have fallen from double digits last quarter to less, to soon less than 8%. 8% sounds pretty great, but when you've got 1.3 billion people, it takes that 9 and 10% just to stay even, not even move ahead. Brazil, a nation that had been in many ways the envy of this last decade, had a growth rate in the first quarter of this last year of less than 1%. And we in our nation, and I share John's comments, we are confronted right now with a debt that is in excess of $16 trillion. And if you want to get bummed out, think about the fact that every day that Congress fails to act, we add $4.5 billion to that debt number. A debt that we, not just our grandchildren or our children, but we will be responsible for paying off. And as Tom Davis said, I think again so accurately, I often ask folks, when I talk to younger groups, they ask me for advice. I say, if all you do is watch Fox News, turn on MSNBC. If all you do is watch Rachel Maddow, listen to Sean Hannity, you've got to realize there are whole sets of information out there that are being laid out as if it's facts when most of it's just plain commentary. But there are some real live facts out there on this challenge. Federal spending right now is at 25% of our GDP. That is an all-time high. Federal revenues, last year, were at 15% of our GDP. That is a 75-year low. Over the last 75 years, we have run deficits each and every year, other than 5 or 6 of those years. So both parties have blame on their hand. And the only time there has been a budget balance in the last 75 years has been when roughly revenues and spending have been between 19.5% and 21%. So it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we've got a challenge with an aging population, increasing threats abroad from non-state actors and enemies alike, that we have to find a way to dramatically cut spending, and I believe generate a tax reform package that will generate more revenues. And the first request I would have of all of you who are part of a group that cares desperately about Virginia and desperately about our country is, you can play an incredible role in this. Anybody that comes before you and says, I'm never going to touch revenues under any circumstance, or if they come at the other side and say, I'm never going to touch entitlements under any circumstance, I ask you, please, to say, well, how are you going to get this problem fixed? How are we going to get this problem fixed? Unless we all step up, and this doesn't make me very popular in my caucus, unless we all get out of our personal comfort zones, and Democrats find Republicans who will be reasonable on revenues and support them, and Republicans find Democrats who are going to be reasonable on entitlement reform and support them, then we are going to get the government we deserve. But the good news is, because you can get, as you watch the news play out, and it seems like one piece of bad news after another, the good news is that what is going to be asked of the American people to get this right is so much less than what any other industrial nation in the world is being asked to do. The notion that we can take $4 to $5 trillion off that $16 trillion debt line over the next 10 years, this is not defeating communism. This is not putting a man on the moon. This is not meeting the kind of challenges of which our nation has always met at times of crisis. We have the incredible luxury of being still far and away the world's strongest economy, of being the currency of last resort. And when we look at all of these problems, we can either look at this as a glass half empty or a glass half full. Since the fiscal crisis of 2008, American corporate balance sheets have never been healthier. And while not perfect, our banking industry today has capital reserves that make other nations' banking systems envy. We, as the Australian Foreign Minister said the other day, are one relatively small budget deal away from regaining American economic supremacy for decades to come. And beyond the value of getting this done, for most of us who are business supporters or business backgrounds ourselves, the greater value is to restore America's confidence that our elected leadership are not all numbnuts. I mean, I got to tell you, I was personally embarrassed to be a member of the United States Congress last August when we went right up to the precipice on that debt ceiling debacle. But if we get it right, the signal this will send to the rest of the world that America will lead the whole world out of these economic challenges, the signal this will send to the American people that we can still be the beacon of hope and beacon of economic opportunity. The fact remains, with all our challenges, we are still the place that the best and the brightest all around the world want to come to study and build their businesses. And we ought to be taking advantage of that. So, yes, the United States Congress is kind of challenging at times. But there are folks like Jerry Connolly and Frank Wolf, and the vast majority of our delegation, who more often than not are willing to check the Republican and Democrat hats and put Virginia and the country first. The so-called gangs, well, we're at 45 plus in the United States Senate at this moment. We're over 100 in the House, in both bodies, virtually equally divided between Democrats and Republicans. So anybody who says this is one party's problem only is just not telling you the truth. Anybody that says you can fix this problem by just cutting out waste and fraud or just by taxing millionaires is not telling you the truth. This is going to be a time when we're all going to have some skin in the game. And the appeal I make to you, this Virginia business community, I didn't fully appreciate it until I got to Washington. Because last spring, as one of those crazies that were trying to force and urge a deal and not have us get to the edge, I went to every national business organization in the country and pleaded with them to get involved. It didn't have to be for Simpson Bowles or Gang of Six, be for any rational plan. And unfortunately, without exception, every one of those business organizations at the national level basically said, well, Warner, you're right, but we don't want to piss off Chairman X or Senator Y, or it might get us on the wrong side of one party or the other. That's not been the history of the Virginia business community. Whether it's been about transportation, whether it's been about our balance sheet, whether it's been about our commitment to, I still believe, the nation's greatest institutions of higher learning, you have always been willing to step up. Well, we need it again. We need it again in spades at this point. So I believe that, this is our time. John Warner was part of the greatest generation. He served our country during World War II, kept our country strong as it defeated the threat of communism. allowed us and helped navigate our nation, along with folks like Jim Gilmore and others in the aftermath of the terrorist strike of 9/11. But as Admiral Mullen has said, greater threat to our country today is this debt and deficit, much greater threat than the threat of terrorism or other outside foreign attack against us. And the ask is so small. The ability we have to phase in these changes over this next decade would mean, in many ways, this would be the grand bargain that not only would get our country back on the right steps, but is not going to require anyone to dramatically transform their life, their business, or their approach. So the ask I make again is, as you have done so many times in the past, let's not be Democrats or Republicans, let's be Virginians and Americans. And the point, John Warner, that makes me, when I sometimes feel like I'm banging my head against the wall up there in this institution that is more than slightly dysfunctional, when I get down a little bit, I always fall back upon that great Winston Churchill quote. You can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after they've tried everything else. Well, my friends, we have tried everything else. It's time for us to do the right thing again. Let's make ourselves proud of our country. Let's make ourselves proud of our institutions. Let's get this thing fixed. Thank you all very much, Clayton. Thank you for Virginia Free.